Hello and welcome to the Two-Man Booth, currently, probably, the shortest weekly episodic wrestling podcast available on the internet, with me, Jonathan.
And me, Adam. And we're going to start this week with the news. And the big news of the week was obviously the All Elite Wrestling Rally in Jacksonville. So, Jonathan, do you want to take us through the highlight of that show?
Yeah, I think the highlight's pretty undoubted. I think the biggest thing that we would say that happened at that rally was the announcement that Chris Jericho, the Ayatollah of rock and roller, is all in with All Elite Wrestling. I think this is an absolutely massive signing for All Elite. It's their first really big move that they've made. Obviously, having the Elite signed is a big deal, but this is the first other signing that they've made. And I think having Jericho around is a massive deal. He carries mainstream appeal in terms of people know his name from when wrestling was super, super popular back in the late 90s. And people, quite simply, people know who he is. We know that he's had a relationship with the Bucks and with the Elite from being the Elite. He's been on that show and he's done several things, including the Jericho Cruise with the Elite. So it's not a total shock, but at the same time, this is a massive deal. And we'll talk about the other things that happened at that rally. But I think coming out of it, Jericho was undoubtedly the star and the main attraction so far for All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah, I think it's huge for the Bucks and Cody to get Jericho. We know the kind of star power that man carries. Obviously, the interesting thing with the Jericho announcement is that we've now got Jericho still in negotiations with New Japan, and given that New Japan have basically said that they're going to stick with ROH and not work alongside All Elite, it's interesting that Jericho seems to fall outside of that mantra. He's clearly still in negotiations with New Japan. Does that potentially open the door later down the line for the likes of Omega if he ends up in All Elite? And we'll come on to that. And the Bucks and Cody, etc., being able to work New Japan as well, will that relationship produce more over the coming months and years? So Jericho being announced as big for All Elite in the sense that it's almost an olive branch with New Japan and it connects them, but also just because of how big of a star Chris Jericho is. But I think now that we've covered that bit, we'll just go through and sort of run through the notes from the rally. We started with SCU with their generic promo at the start. There was nothing major to it. I think we all knew that SCU were going to be a part of this, so it wasn't a massive surprise to see them there, and I think they treated it as such and just got them to sort of warm the audience up, which was a good way to start. And when they were finished, Cody then came out and he started talking about things like wins and losses are going to matter. The fans are going to be able to choose who they like, who they dislike. They're not going to tell them who they should like. It felt like the way they were talking, if they follow through on what they were saying, that they have their finger sort of on the pulse of wrestling at the minute. And I think that's something we've seen with the Bucks for years now. They've been at the forefront of sort of the social media usage, the way they've sort of done their merchandise, etc. They've really been at the forefront of what professional wrestling is becoming. And it felt like they had the finger on the pulse here, so hopefully that's something we'll see going forward.
I think as well with those announcements, I mean, wins and losses mattering in wrestling, what a great idea. It's almost like it's a competitive sport. But with those announcements, I think it's almost like it's almost anti-WWE in that we've seen in the past those things go by the wayside in WWE. Not consistently, but on occasions. I think particularly with the note about, we're not going to tell you who you should cheer for. We have seen countless occasions where WWE has forced you, you are meant to cheer this guy. Why do you hate him? Because there's loads of reasons. But I think it's a really important thing. And I think it's in terms of getting fans invested and getting fans to want to watch anything that's going to make them think, oh, wow, this is cool and different. I'll definitely check it out at least for a week. Is a big deal.
It's important to be an alternative, I think, and that's something a lot of the companies that have tried to be number two to WWE have not managed to nail. the likes of your TNAs, and even to an extent Ring of Honor, they've not managed to differentiate themselves enough from WWE, and sometimes you watch the shows and it feels like you're just watching WWE Light. This feels like it's going to be very different, and obviously we'll have to see how it is going forward, but that was the impression I got from Cody. The Bucks then came out and announced sort of something that I was not expecting, came completely out of left field, which was their relationship with Shima and OWE. I remember, I think it was T-Hawk from that group that went massively viral over the summer with the Twitter clips where he was doing this insane sort of almost Cirque du Soleil style wrestling. It'll be interesting to see whether that's the style they're going for or whether that's just going to be used as something like the Cruiserweights were in WCW.
Like a niche attraction.
Yeah. I don't know whether the whole promotion's going to be more tailored towards that style of wrestling. I know we have talked in the past about me and you and not particularly enjoying sort of the Dragon Gate sort of product. I feel like from what I saw from a very short viral clip, that's what it kind of felt like to me. Very Dragon Gate-y style stuff, and obviously with Shima as the leader of the group, that is certainly something we would expect. So I'm not sure how I would feel about that, but it'll certainly be interesting to see how they fit them into the show. They also then announced, and this was the big one, All In 2, Double or Nothing. It's going to be at the MGM Grand Arena in...
Huge.
Yeah, huge. In Las Vegas. Double or Nothing fits with the Vegas theme. It's a 16,500 seater, I think, so it's they're running bigger than they ran for the original All In at the Sears Centre. So
why not?
Exactly. When you can sell out 10,000 tickets in the time frame they did, why not go bigger? We'll see whether they can draw again. I think this will definitely be one where they draw really, really well. I think the interesting one's going to be, they also announced the second show in Jacksonville. How's that one going to draw? It's in an area that's not as well known for wrestling. It's going to be not as sort of niche thing in the sense of like it was an attraction at All In because we didn't know whether there was going to be another one. All In 2 is going to be an attraction because this is going to be the first show since they've announced everything. The Jacksonville show will probably be the one where we find out how are these guys going to draw on a regular basis.
I think that's true. Cody said in an interview that he had after the rally, because the wrestling press were obviously there to find out what they were going to say. Cody said that they were aware that Jacksonville is not, he said in his time in WWE, he knew that Jacksonville was not a wrestling hotbed and WWE would not struggle, but they certainly wouldn't draw what they would draw in other larger markets when they went to Jacksonville. So I think that's almost like the litmus test for All Elite. If they can go there and they can draw well, then they know that they are just a draw as a company, much in the same way that WWE have become.
But it's also sort of flooding the market in terms of the more times you go to the well, the less returns you usually get from it. So we'll see what happens and whether as they do more and more shows they become less and less of a draw because it becomes less and less of a special attraction. But it's something we'll have to see going forward, and there's no real point speculating about it at this point until we get to that point. So that was followed up by Brandy coming out. She is the Chief Brandy Officer of All Elite Wrestling.
Hashtag.
So she came out and she announced that there will be a women's division, which I thought was a big thing because it was not something we knew either way. So it was nice of them to announce that. They also announced that women are going to be paid equally to men. And they clarified this after the rally because there was some confusion around it, like is everybody going to be on a flat rate? Because there's no way you're going to be paying whoever they bring in for the women's division the same as Chris Jericho. But what they have said is that it's going to be based on your position on the card rather than your gender. So if you're a mid-card woman, you will be paid as the same as a mid-card man, which I think is something we should be at in the 21st century. In 2019, that should be happening anyway, but
equality.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big one. And then they announced the first women's signing, apart from Brandy, obviously, in Britt Baker. So that was a nice to get a name to go into that division as well. And I think Britt Baker's somebody that everybody's kind of had a little bit of interest in. She's worked some ROH shows. I know there was interest from NXT. So it's kind of big for them to seal her down to a contract.
And she was part of that fantastic four-way match at All In, which I think everybody enjoyed.
And I think that was really what got her a big break, to be honest. And that was why ROH brought her in. That was why NXT were probably interested in her. So it's big for All Elite to get her And then the next thing we moved on to was MJF. Now, I know you don't know that much about MJF, but I've seen him a few times in MLW.
I thought he was fantastic. I will say that.
Yeah.
Great on the mic. He's fantastic on the mic.
He is okay in the ring. He's never blown me away. I've never seen a match where I went, wow, when I was watching MJF. But his promo work is fantastic.
He's almost like an EC3.
Kind of.
His promo work's so great that, like, you almost forget about the matches not being, like, 5 stars or anything like that.
He's a great storyteller on the microphone, and I think he cut a really good promo. I don't know what you thought, but I thought he cut a really good promo.
I thought it was really, really cool. Like, I didn't know very much about him actually going into the show, because I watch a lot of wrestling, but Evolve is not one of those things. I keep up as much as I can, but I just simply wasn't aware of him. So when he came up, I messaged you, didn't I? I said, like, who's this guy? Like I said, I just didn't know him. And then after about, 2 minutes of him just talking, I was sold. I think he's one of the best young mic talkers I've probably ever seen, and that's pretty high praise.
Yeah, and then we got a weird distraction with a Jacksonville Jaguar mascot, I think it was, coming out. And
it almost looked like the bear from Being the Elite.
Did it? I thought it was the Jags mascot. I mean, I don't know who the Jags mascot is, but that's what it looked like to me. Anyway, so they came out and distracted MJF, and then all of a sudden, Joey Janela appears with Penelope Ford. Seemed to set up potentially Janela versus MJF at Double or Nothing. That was certainly what I got out of it, and it felt like this was a theme throughout the show where they were setting things up so that there was something to get your teeth into going into Double or Nothing, leaving you thinking about the potential matchups that are coming out.
Without giving everything away.
Exactly. The next thing we had was Hangman Page coming out to the stage. You know what, like, I remember, I don't know whether you remember this, but when Hangman Page first came around and he was in the Decade, I was talking about how I saw him as the next Adam Cole in ROH because he was a really good heel at the time, and I felt like if he could cut some good heel promos, he would eventually just ascend to that level. It felt like he was just missing a couple of things. This year, he's got those things finally. It's taken him longer than I thought it would, but he's finally got there to the point where I think he is a top star now on the indie scene. Not that All Elite's potentially going to be an indie, but certainly on the indie scene. And he certainly made splashes in New Japan. And he came out here, and like I watched him and I thought, my God, you carry yourself like a star.
Felt like a main eventer, didn't he?
He did.
Really did.
Which was interesting then, because he talked about wanting to be the first world champion of All Elite. Now, we haven't officially had an announcement that there's going to be a world championship, but I think we all know there's going to be a world championship. And it seemed to be, whether they do a tournament or whether it's just going to be a straight one-on-one match, Hangman Page is going to be in there, and there's a certain somebody else that's going to be in there as well, and he made his appearance known, holding the Dragon Gate Championship, the
man that gravity forgot.
Yeah.
Pac. Adrian Neville.
Yeah.
Or Neville. I think he forgot his first name, didn't he?
At some point, yeah.
Yeah. But this is a huge, huge signing. I think everyone's wanted him since it was announced his contract had come to an end with WWE. He was kept in the Cruiserweight division for so long, and he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but clearly deserved more. And his character, his sort of... Whenever I hear him speak, I automatically I'm transported into like Game of Thrones by the way that he speaks and his sort of gimmick of like the king of the cruiserweights. And I think this is a huge signing. Not as big as Jericho or anything like that, but in terms of longevity and someone who's going to consistently be there, it's a big deal. It's also worth noting that he is very much the Dragon Gate champion.
Does that imply a working relationship with Dragon Gate?
And we know that Shima's involved.
Yeah. It would certainly be interesting, because if they haven't managed to get that relationship with New Japan, is that where they go? Because a lot of people were talking, do they still have a relationship in Japan? Do they go to All Japan? Do they go to Pro Wrestling Noah? But it seems to be that Dragon Gate would be the way forward for them if they're bringing somebody like Pac and Shima's guys in.
Absolutely. And Dragon Gate, I don't personally like Dragon Gate now. I feel like it's very flippy, which is fine, but very little actually selling of moves. It's always like a faked fight without the pin. But way back when, Dragon Gate used to be called Toymon, and that was just a masterpiece of a promotion. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But yeah, any relationship they can get with Dragon Gate would be a big deal. For anyone that doesn't know Japanese wrestling that well, in terms of popularity, Dragon Gate is the number 2 wrestling promotion in Japan. It regularly runs very big shows with several thousand-seater arenas. So any deal they can get with them, as long as they make them wrestle, is a good deal.
And I think I may have jumped the gun earlier when we were talking about the Jacksonville show, but this was the point in the rally where they mentioned the Jacksonville show. So Cody and the Bucks came back out and they announced the Jacksonville show. They also announced, just as an aside, that a portion of the proceeds from that show is going to go to victims of gun violence, which I thought was a lovely touch. Not something that had to do, the press were going to be all over this anyway. It's not like them making this announcement to get themselves some headlines or anything. It's clearly just something they wanted to do, so I thought that was a really nice touch.
And it gets some goodwill from the fans.
Absolutely.
Not in a negative way,
Yeah.
not in like a we're trying hard. It's just it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we came on to what we've already discussed. The main event of the entire rally was Chris Jericho, and he came out there, and we talked about Adam Page looking like a star. He looks like a rock star. I know he actually is a rock star, by the way. I do know that. But he came out and he looked like an absolute rock star when he came out, and it was almost like the fans recognised the music, and you can see them kind of just stood there, and I thought Jericho would get a bigger reaction. They didn't mic the crowd very well, so you couldn't hear anything anyway, but it didn't seem like people were going nuts. But as soon as he walked through and they could see him, there was people jumping up and down. Don't underestimate, just because sometimes when you look on the internet, people are a little bit down on Jericho. Chris Jericho is a huge superstar to so many people.
And he has more longevity than most of the people from his era. People like The Rock, Austin, maybe obviously they were a little bit earlier, but people from his era have not carried on and been around as long as Jericho. We talked about him last week with the Wrestle Kingdom show and how he's still able to have these great, great matches. The only thing I will talk about is that obviously with Jericho being there, we do need to wait and see what his scheduling is going to be with All Elite, because he has plenty of other commitments. He has his podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, you need to check out, Talk is Jericho. But he also has Fozzy, his band, which is fantastic as well, and he has other commitments, so he may end up working the same kind of deal that he did with WWE, where he was there for portions of time for the big events, you know, the WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, those kind of things, and then he'll be away for a period of time, which would make more sense for Jericho at his age.
Yeah, but I think it all depends on what schedule they're going to run. If when they announce their TV deal, which we still don't have any detail around, but seems to be something that will be signed imminently, will they be running live TV every week, or will they be doing a taping system where they tape like NXT does or ROH do, where they tape 4 shows in one go? If that's the case, it makes it more likely that Jericho can be there more frequently, because he can work 4 shows in one night.
I hadn't thought of that. Good point, actually.
So it all depends on what their schedule is going to be as well, but definitely Jericho's schedule is going to be something we'll have to keep an eye on going forward.
I think also, just before we move on, when you talk about a TV deal, Brandy and Cody were interviewed after the show, and they said that they had plenty of other announcements to make. When they were asked about a TV deal, they said, we'll see, there are things in place. And at that point, Cody winked. And that's kind of a hint that there are TV deals on the table, they just got to pick. But the main thing that they said, and it's really cool, and it shows how much they get the business, is they wanted Jericho to be the star of this rally and for Jericho to get the headlines, which is just it's really cool. And it shows how nice a guy Cody and the rest of the Elite are.
So I think the nice segue into the next piece of news is definitely to talk about Kenny Omega.
The best bout machine.
Yeah. Obviously, he's kind of announced he's leaving New Japan. Originally, when it came out, there was a lot of people saying, is it a shoot? Is it a work? I definitely think this is real. And I definitely think he's going to All Elite, if I'm being perfectly honest. There's been people talking about how big a money offer WWE have made to him. But I definitely think that he's going to be at All Elite. What do you think?
I think he's definitely going to be there. I think it shows... I mean, we're surprised, almost, aren't we? Because WWE want Omega, and we've been conditioned for so long that WWE is the place that they all want to be. They all want to get there because it's where the big boys... No, that was WCW.
No, it was WCW.
I know, that was weird. But it was Land of the Giants, sorry. I'm trying to think of my wrestling vocabulary. But it's where they all want to be. And you'd assume that Omega would want to be there. I mean, he was there when he was very, very young, but not properly. But at the same time, he's friends with the Bucks and with Cody. It does seem logical that he would be there. However, the fact that WWE have offered him what would appear to be a lot of money, I don't know any figures.
Yeah, me neither.
But the fact that they've offered him a lot of money and he has chosen to go to All Elite is huge. And Jericho will draw people in, but also Omega. If people haven't seen him before, Omega will keep them there.
Yeah, he's definitely, if they do get him, and if that's the case, he is their top star, without a doubt. The next person we've got to talk about, and it seems like we're talking about a lot of New Japan guys right now, is the upcoming exit of Kushida.
I think this makes sense. We did talk about it.
Touched on it, yeah.
Yeah, I sort of talked about if I was a career advisor, I'd suggest that Kushida went to WWE. One thing that we didn't mention last week as well, that I wish we had, is that on New Year's Dash, Kushida took the fall in his match. And I didn't mention that, and that probably sort of foreshadowed a little bit that Kushida was maybe on his way out. It's cool for Kushida. He's a very good wrestler. I think, as we said last week, he's very much a failed ace for the junior division. He never became the Tanahashi or the Okada that they wanted him to be. But he'll be fondly remembered by New Japan fans. And for him, it's really cool. He'll have to go to NXT and spend at least a year there, I would expect. But he's worked the American style before, so it shouldn't take too much of adjustment for him. He will have to develop his character beyond the fact that he likes Back to the Future. That's about a 10-second promo.
I think NXT will really help him with that as well. Not only will it be a chance for Kushida to get sort of used to the American style, which he already really knows quite well with his time in Canada and his time in ROH and stuff like that, but I think it'll definitely help him get his character down pat. And NXT is probably might be the best place in North America to get that down at the minute. So, really good place for him to go, and I think it's a good career move for Kushida. And to be honest, I don't think it's a bad move for New Japan. I think it's time for them to move on, like you say, from the failed acehood. I think it's time to get some fresh faces in the junior division. And I think NXT could benefit from him as well. So, I think it's a win-win-win, really.
Yeah, NXT are always going to lose people. So, they need this constant influx of guys. We know that they've lost people very recently to Raw and SmackDown, wherever the people go. So they need this new influx, and Kushida's are more than serviceable. I would expect him to sort of be, if I was booking NXT, I'd have him at sort of the North American title level. I don't think he's like an NXT title guy. We'd have to see what they do, but...
Yeah, I think it depends on where they go with him, like you were about to say there. It all depends on what Kushida turns up. In the ring, I don't think anybody can deny his talent. It's what he can do as a character and what he can do with his promos, and that'll be what will decide where he falls in the pecking order in NXT for me. I think it's now time probably for us to end the news and move on to Monday Night Raw. We both watched this show this week, and I think that's probably the first time in months that we've both watched a full Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, all 3 hours of it.
Yeah.
One of the last times I remember us both actually sitting down to watch Raw was the Raw after Survivor Series, where Ziggler, along with the help of Sting, saved the WWE from the Authority for about a month and a half.
Was it even that?
Around that, yeah. It was, yeah. It meant that it just didn't matter. But I thought Raw was okay. There were bits of it that were very, very good, and there were bits of it that were absolutely atrocious. And in 3 hours, you're probably always going to get that. You know, back when Nitro was 3 hours, it was pretty much the same. There would be bad segments, there would be good segments.
Depends on the era of Nitro.
Yeah. Maybe more bad than good.
Yeah, towards the end.
But I really enjoyed a lot about Raw. I thought Rollins absolutely carried the show. And that's something that's not new news. Mm-hmm. Rollins has been carrying Raw for quite a long time. He said it. Was it last week he said it to Triple H?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, he's been carrying Raw for a long time. Like, he really, because the Universal Championship is not there, Rollins is the champion, or has been the champion on Raw. The guy that can go out there and have a great 20-minute match in the main event. I really did like the little character development that they're doing with Rollins when he won his match, and then thought, obviously last week I was taught to prove myself. I have proved myself, and then looked up towards Titantron, and Triple H was not looking. He was talking to, was it Sasha and Bayley?
I think it was Sasha and Bayley.
Yeah, he was talking to Sasha and Bayley and just wasn't watching, and Rollins was clearly annoyed about that. Went backstage and sort of confronted Triple H and said, I deserve my shot. I want my shot. You haven't watched. And Triple H was clearly impressed at sort of this, like the old Seth Rollins part, that coming back without being a heel, and gave him the title shot in the main event. And the main event was a lot better than their match at, was it TLC?
Yeah, couldn't have been much worse.
Yeah, but it was a lot better. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Rollins carried the show. I know you said that you very much expect Rollins to win the Royal Rumble this year.
I was wondering a little bit about that because it seemed like they were heading towards an Intercontinental title rematch, and I'm thinking I can't see him losing to Ambrose at the Rumble and then winning the Rumble. So I was wondering if maybe the SmackDown guy was going to win it and Rollins would end up getting the shot at the Universal title later. But this certainly frees him up to now win the Rumble because he's had his rematch, even though we have no automatic rematches, but whatever. But he's had his rematch and he's lost, and he can now move on and potentially go on and go into the Royal Rumble and win it, because I think he's definitely the guy that it feels like is going to be Brock Lesnar's opponent at WrestleMania.
He's the guy, and he's been the guy for quite some time.
Yeah. Like, the show to me was it was almost a Jekyll and Hyde show. I felt like it was 90 minutes of really good stuff and 90 minutes of really bang average stuff or bad stuff.
Boring.
Yeah. Mostly bang average, but there was some bad stuff in there. The 6-man tag that opened the show I thought was great. Thoroughly enjoyable match. Like you say, Rollins carried it, but everybody who was in that match played their part. It was a really good match to open the show. And the promo that had preceded it, and then the work with Hunter afterwards was all really good. I really liked that Hunter segment you were talking about because it was different. It was something different to what you usually see. Like, you never see people shown backstage on the Titantron and then somebody seeing it and doing something about it. It just felt like they were trying different things, and I like to see that because my main complaint with a 3-hour Raw is it feels so formulaic for 3 whole hours. It's such a long show to get through, and when everything's the same, it's like a hospital environment. It was just nice to see something different.
I think it's because it's the same formula that they've been running since the Attitude Era, and I think Vince is stuck in that because, like, my God, it works back then, so why wouldn't it work now? The problem is that if you do anything, even if it's great, if you do it for so long, eventually it's like, right, well, what new stuff have you got?
So Seth pinned Dean with the curb stomp, and that basically set up the main event. So the next thing I think we should touch on is Hulk Hogan, Mean Gene Okerlund.
Brother.
We obviously talked about this last week with the death of Mean Gene, and I feel like the video they put together was lovely. I had a little bit of discomfort seeing Hogan, and I think I always will, with what has gone on and what's came out about him. I felt very uncomfortable watching him come down to the ring, but when he got in the ring and he cut this promo, unlike most Hogan promos I've ever heard, he really made it about Mean Gene Okerlund, and that was something that I really enjoyed. I thought he cut a really nice promo. It was a lovely, touching tribute, and whatever you think of Hogan, I think Mean Gene Okerlund deserved to be honoured in that way, and it was a really nice segment.
I think the one thing that we do need to mention is that when I saw the segment, I watched it just on my phone the morning after, just because I wanted to see what had happened with Hogan. I was stunned at the reaction for Hogan. He got cheered, but I was expecting a huge pop. Like, it's Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in the history of wrestling.
North American wrestling, yeah.
Yeah, we know that there's stuff that's happened, obviously, in the last few years, but I was stunned that he didn't get a bigger pop. I was uncomfortable with it as well. I felt that it was almost a little bit of an excuse to bring Hogan back, as if, like, right, well, you guys can't be angry at that because it's for Mean Gene. Not to be totally cynical, I may be totally wrong, but it did feel like a bit of an excuse. It's like, oh, we can get Hogan back on TV now. It's okay, the crowd will be okay with it. Hogan was, I thought, quite rusty at the beginning of his promo. It'd been a long time since he'd been out in front of a crowd like that. But by the end, Hogan was Hogan again. And you're right, it was a really touching promo. And by the end, it achieved what it should have done, which is help everybody remember Mean Gene Okerlund. Yeah,
it was lovely, and rest in peace, Mean Gene. Rude and Gable versus The Revival was next. This feud blows my mind. I'm a big fan of all 4 guys, and I think they should be having great matches. They had a good match which had no heat, because none of the 4 have been positioned as stars.
Why should you care?
So why should you care? But what really annoyed me about this, and it's something we'll touch on later when we go into SmackDown as well, they seem to have no idea how to book babyfaces and heels. Like, in this storyline, the babyfaces are getting fluky wins, and the heels keep getting screwed week after week. How are you meant to build any sympathy for the babyfaces? How are you meant to care about them as individuals? And how are you meant to hate the heels when actually they're getting screwed every time they get an opportunity at the title?
And they're the better team. In terms of the eyes of the story that they're telling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they almost win, and then, like, a fluke loss happens. And it hurts the Revival, who are probably, along with the Young Bucks, the best tag team in the world. And it doesn't help Gable and Rude, because they're the good guys who are only champs because they get lucky. Good in wrestling history, it used to be that the good guys were good guys and they were really, really good wrestlers, and the bad guys were the bad guys and cheated because they weren't as good wrestlers and had to cheat in order to beat the good guys. That's the way it used to be.
Definitely, and I don't know why we've gone away from that formula. I really don't. The next segment we came on to was Elias and Corbin. The segment was boring. The match was boring. I don't know whether you've got anything to add, but it was what it was there.
I like Elias. I really like him in his character. But if Baron Corbin never wrestled in WWE again, I don't think I'd notice. Yeah, I like Elias, but if you put anybody with Corbin, it just gets go away heat from me. I just don't want to see it.
Elias' strength is in his character work, not in his in-ring work, and I think working with somebody who's such a vacuum heat like Corbin is going to ruin his promos, and then you get a match between two guys who just aren't awfully good.
The one thing I will say, and we forgot to mention it, it's not about this segment, it's about the segment that we've just talked about. It's a very minor detail, but the Revival came out with Trunks, obviously, but the Trunks said hashtag FTR, which if you haven't watched Being Elite means F the Revival. But it's a reference to the Elite, and there's been a lot of rumours that Revival would be one of the people that All Elite would be looking at, and it seems an interesting time to decide to do that. Whether it's just the Revival trying to get a little bit of exposure, I don't know, but it was a bit interesting. Anyway, back on with definitely. The recap.
So the next segment we had should have been one of the strongest segments on the show, and it was anything but. So we're setting up the Universal Championship match for the Royal Rumble between Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman. This segment, well, it sure existed.
Ish. It sort of looked like Braun forgot his lines
several times.
Quite a lot. And it meant that there was massive long pauses in between. Braun can be a really good promo in terms of like what's scripted for him and his delivery of those promos. But when you send him out there and he forgets his words, you've basically got Brock, who's not a great promo, and Braun, who without scripting is not a great promo, and Heyman. And Heyman can't talk to himself.
Yeah, exactly. You know, CM Punk can go out there and cut soliloquies. That's not Braun Strowman's strength. And him going out there and having to do this long promo was never going to work for me. I like Braun Strowman's promos when they're short, sweet, to the point, and he just exists within a car wreck situation.
The one thing I will say as well, watching this segment, like Braun, I don't consider Braun to be a great wrestler, but I consider him to be more than decent in the ring. The main thing is how much less of a star Braun Strowman feels.
His overness has been hurt massively.
Oh, he just feels like just another guy. And 6 months ago, he was the guy. Rollins is clearly the guy to run with now. 6 months ago, it was Braun.
If you continually beat somebody and show them up to be a loser, that's going to happen. Why would you cheer for a guy who consistently loses unless his name's Tommy Dreamer?
Monsters have got to beat people quite a lot.
So we then moved on to another segment, which was, again, not all that good. We had a mixed match challenge, a kind of suppose match, even though the mixed match challenge is over, but we're still going with these mixed tag things. It was fine. The right guys won. Let's just move on.
Yeah, I agree. Enough said.
And unfortunately, we've now got to come on to the Moment of Bliss segment. This was another segment which was cringy and very, very poor throughout.
This is just really bad writing, quite honestly. I don't know how they think that they can send Ronda Rousey out there for an extended talking segment. Ronda was great at talking in UFC. The main reason that she was great at talking in UFC is because she only said a few things and she spoke in sound bites, but those sound bites sounded really, really cool. She doesn't need to talk for 5 minutes. Like you said about Punk doing soliloquies, that's not Ronda's game. And people want to see Ronda tear off people's arms. They don't want to see her sit and talk to Alexa Bliss for several minutes.
And I get that Alexa Bliss is a star, and I've always been a big fan of hers, and with her being out at the minute, they're trying to find ways to use her. You've got to find a better way than this, because it didn't work for Ronda, it didn't work for Alexa, and it certainly didn't work for Sasha Banks. I mean, do you remember when we went to watch the Royal Rumble at a pub in Middlesbrough, and Sasha Banks' name was being chanted throughout a match she wasn't even in? People were determined, and when she came out at the end, I think it was in Houston. It was the last time they ran a stadium for the Rumble, which they're running again this year at Chase Field. She got a massive reaction when she came out. And yet here, people booed. People booed Sasha Banks being announced as the contender for Royal Rumble.
That's what happens when you book someone badly for around, a year and a half now. Bayley's had the same treatment. You know that for a very long time, Sasha Banks was my favourite female wrestler, probably in the world. Her matches were good. I don't think they were great looking back. We've had a big improvement in women's wrestling since, but Sasha just got her character so much, and it's just been ruined over the last year and a half. They've taken someone who legitimately is a star, and they've just ruined her. And it's cool that she got that opportunity. I was really happy that I saw that she got that opportunity, and I hope she runs with it.
The match will probably be good.
Yeah, I hope she runs with it, but the fact that they're booing her is concerning. They should have turned her heel about a year ago, to be honest.
Yeah, I know it's cliche to say a heel turn will fix things, but I think a heel turn's probably the best direction for Sasha Banks to go.
She's a natural born heel. She always has been. She's cool, and she will get cheered, but she's a heel.
And if the crowd are booing her anyway, steer into the skids.
Yeah, run with it.
Sasha Nia was a bit of a drag as well, but, Sasha gets the big win over the person who's just contended for the title. She moves on, she'll face Ronda at the Rumble. I'm sure the match will be good.
That bit's solid fucking.
So we came on to the main event, and as you mentioned earlier, it was Seth versus Dean for the Intercontinental title, and as you mentioned earlier, this was a lot better than their TLC match. A lot better. The TLC match, considering how much I like both guys, was horrendous. Mm-hmm. This was a really good Falls Count Anywhere match. Nothing blow away. It's not going to be match of the year at the end of the year, but for a Raw main event with the title on the line, really, really good match.
I think it's really hard we say about Falls Count Anywhere. I think it's really hard for a Falls Count Anywhere match to be like a match of the year candidate. They're not really designed for that. What they are designed to be is really, really fun, and just people throw in as much as they can at each other. I thought it was a good match from what I saw. I enjoyed it, and I think in the end it was the right decision. And like we said, it frees Rollins up.
And we continued to see with this show that WWE renegotiated their TV deals at exactly the right time, because they drew 2.3 million for this show, which is their best since the post-TLC show, but they drew 2.9 million this week last year. So they've lost 600,000 fans in a year.
That's just a simple decline when you don't run your company properly.
So with that, I think we'll move on to SmackDown. I thoroughly enjoyed this show. It wasn't as good as SmackDown's been over the years at times, but I thought it was a really, really fun show. I don't know what you thought.
I loved this. There were bits of it that didn't quite hit the mark, but as a 2-hour show, I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. There were two highlights for me. I think they're the two highlights of the show that we mentioned last week about SmackDown. But the opening segment was one of the most fun opening segments I've ever watched. Just angry Daniel Bryan ranting at people, telling them that they are empty because of the way that they live their lives, and snatching hot dogs off people and getting mustard on his shirt, and throwing Coke or whatever sugary drink it was into someone. It was great, and it shows how far Bryan's come on the mic, that he can just carry a segment like that. It was fantastic, and I'm the biggest fan of Daniel Bryan's character. I think I've seen some people say, and this says a lot with the Yes Movement character that he had, I've seen some people argue that this is the best character that he's ever had.
Certainly since he's come to WWE, I don't think that's any question. I loved the Yes Movement era, but I don't think it was so much about Bryan as a character. I think it was just the fans getting behind this babyface that they loved. It wasn't necessarily character work Bryan was doing. He was just an over-underdog. This is definitively character work, and the opening segment was a ton of fun. And you know what? This mini Bryan Truth feud has been a ton of fun. Like, I've long been a proponent of R-Truth and being used more on television, because I think as a mid-carder, you don't get much better than him. He's a mid-carder for life, but he is very, very good at that role, and he's been a really good foil for Bryan. And I thought they had a fun segment, they had a fun match. It was a nice little sprint, didn't need to last too long. Bryan gets the win, clean as a whistle in the middle of the ring. Absolutely fine. Great opening segment.
I agree. Absolutely loved it.
And then we came on to probably the best match on WWE TV this week. The tag team match between Andrade Cien Almas and Samoa Joe and Rey Mysterio and Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali continues to shine in his new role on SmackDown. So much fun to watch. Mysterio is Mysterio. Joe is Joe. And Andrade Cien Almas getting a big win.
Yeah, I think the stars of this match were Ali and Almas. Ali continues to show that he belongs at this level, and the way that they've booked him so far has been really good. He feels like he belongs in that ring. He's obviously the underdog because he's not been there very long, but he does feel like he belongs at the level of those other guys. I've been a massive fan of Mustafa Ali for quite a while. As his story has developed in 205 Live, the more that I've watched it, he's a massive loss for 205 Live, as we'll come on to later. But I thought he was fantastic in this match, and the match was clearly designed around Ali and Almas, which is strange that Joe's like the side piece, but it was clearly designed that way. And Almas got the win, and it appears that Almas is starting to regain that momentum. As NXT champion, you and I will both agree we absolutely loved him and we thought he was brilliant. And his match with Johnny Gargano at TakeOver,
it was the Rumble TakeOver last year.
Yeah, I can't remember its name.
Yeah.
But that was absolutely fantastic. And he's a main event level guy, upper mid carder at the very least. And to see him start to get some momentum again is really good because he deserves it, and he's been booked badly for quite some time. It's felt like he's not been the star of his group, but with Zelina Vega, he's now feeling like the star again.
Yeah, because for a while it felt like Zelina was the only person they cared about in that relationship, and she added so much to Andrade Cien Almas when she came in. Like we completely changed tack on him. I'd loved him as La Sombra. You'd seen bits of him, and when he came into NXT, you just felt like he was kind of there. As soon as she came in, everything clicked. And he became this awesome guy, and he became NXT champion, which we were both really happy about. He had a really good run as NXT champion, and since he's come to SmackDown, he's kind of lost his luster a little bit. Felt like to me they were setting up something with Almas and Ray here, potential WrestleMania match.
I think so as well. I think there's clearly seeds planted, and we said that for Almas it would be a really, really big deal to get to face Ray. A match with Ray at Mania, no matter who you are, is a big deal.
And you know what? It really speaks to their Hispanic audience as well. They've been looking for somebody to take over the Rey Mysterio role. They've not been able to find somebody. They've brought Rey back. And they've got this guy who could definitely be. He's good looking. He's great in the ring. He's great on sort of character work. And he's got a manager who can speak for him. He is the next Hispanic superstar. And you put him in there with Rey Mysterio, and I think they'll have a really good match. And it will put Andrade Cien Almas over as that next top Hispanic star. So next up, we had the Miz and Shane segment backstage. We've talked about this week. I think you kind of like this angle.
I don't love it.
It does nothing for me.
Yeah, I don't love it. I think they're sort of trying to go down like a Team Hell No type comedy tag team, and I love Team Hell No when that was around. But this doesn't feel quite the same. I do like it. I do think it'll be an interesting angle. I really hope that one of them doesn't turn on the other, because I've seen that so many times. I don't want to see it. But I wouldn't mind seeing them win the titles and then lose them at Mania or something like that. That would be okay. I do think the Bar probably deserve a little bit more from their ability. The Bar are a fantastic tag team. But it's inoffensive to me, I'll put it that way. I like it. I don't love it. But when it comes on, I don't actively look away or stop paying attention.
Well, SmackDown kind of fell off a cliff next. We had the Rusev Day segment. Now, if you'll bear with me, this was an infuriating segment to me.
Oh,
so
awful.
You've got Rusev coming out there, and I like Rusev. I've got a lot of time for him. His promo delivery is usually pretty good. His delivery here was awful. Let's just get that out of the way.
Shocking.
Yeah, really bad, and I don't know why, but the content he was given as well just was completely nonsensical to me. You've got Rusev coming out here, the babyface, who is not telling the truth about what happened last week. The heel, Shinsuke Nakamura, comes on and tells the truth and proves it with video evidence, no less. And then you've got Rusev getting angry that the heel's telling the truth, so he runs backstage and he gets beat up.
Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy again?
They do not seem to know how to book babyfaces.
No, they haven't for quite some time now. And that's a big problem. Yeah, I thought the segment sucked as well. Watching it was awful. It dragged as well. I don't think it was that long a segment. It just sucked.
It felt like it.
Yeah, Nakamura is fantastic. I've said Adam before, Nakamura for a very, very long time was my favourite wrestler from his New Japan connections. I think he probably always will be, but I just wish they'd do better things with them. I really do. I think he should have won the belt at WrestleMania and stayed babyface, to be honest. If you ever see that entrance at WrestleMania, the entrance is really cool with what they did for him. And he was over. They should have just put the belt on him.
Yeah, they should have pulled the trigger, but Nakamura, I don't think he's in a bad position on the card, and I think this feud with Rusev could be fun. This segment just was no good.
Just write it better.
Yeah. So we moved on to the Bar versus the Usos. I think I added this up correctly, and I think this is their 72,000th match on TV against each other. I may be off by one or two, but that was what it certainly came to for me.
Close.
It was fine. The match itself was fine, but like I say, we've supposedly moved into this new era where we've had a bit of a shake-up, and yet we're still seeing the same match. The Sanity and the Good Brothers appeared for, a week, and we're back to normal. The match itself, like I said, was fine. The ending was just something straight out of Nitro in 2000. It was bad.
It was shocking. It was awful. I mean, the Mandy Rose angle makes no sense anyway. Why would he care? He's with Naomi. They've openly acknowledged that he's with Naomi and that they've got a long-term... I don't know. Are they married?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're married. So why on earth would he be bothering about Mandy Rose, who's in a, towel or whatever it was, on the top of the stage? Why would that distract him? There's no reason that would distract. He's very happy with Naomi. They've never acknowledged any problems between the two of them on TV. It just, it was dreadful. And it made the Usos look so stupid.
So, coming on to what you mentioned, this led to The Miz coming out after the match and challenging the Bar for the Rumble. That's the match they're doing at the Royal Rumble. They're running a stadium for this. They're running Chase Field in Arizona, in Phoenix. And that's the tag team title match. I get that the two Rumble matches and any potential WWE Championship between Bryan and AJ, etc., they're going to be the draws. But really, that's the best you can come up with for the tag team titles. That's the best you can come up with for the Bar.
The problem is that they've trained us for so long to think that McMahon's are stars no matter what. Like I say, the angle doesn't offend me. But I'm it's not the reason why I'm going to go and watch Royal Rumble.
Well, you mentioned that you really hope that they don't turn on each other. Or one of them doesn't turn on the other.
I've seen it. It feels like a formula that I've seen so many times.
Yeah, well, when I watched the next segment, when Miz and Shane are backstage, my God, did it feel like somebody's turning the Rumble.
Yeah, I know. I think it's happening. I just don't want to see it. I've seen it before.
I have zero desire to see either of them turn on each other. But it is what it is. So I guess we'll move on. And the next thing was the triple threat. Now, I know you mentioned that you really liked something we haven't really touched on here was the way they built this match, the promos throughout the show. I felt they were kind of a little bit generic, but I know you like the three promos.
I think the reason why I liked it is because I like them doing different things. And seeing them do stuff like that, you're right, you could certainly argue that it was a bit generic and they didn't say anything that was totally different. Becky's promo was good because she just delivers whatever she's given really well. But it was just cool to see them building up the main event through the show and giving you a reason to be hey, this is a 2 hour show. 2 hours is a decent amount of time. I should stick around and watch this because it might be quite cool.
Yeah, I did like that element of it, the way they built throughout the show to the main event. I just wasn't a fan of the content within the promos themselves. The match itself, I thought was okay. It didn't blow us away. It certainly wasn't as good as the tag match earlier on, but it was a fine main event. Interesting that Becky won. Now,
yeah, it worries me.
Yeah,
it really worries me.
We've wondered for a long time what they were going to do at WrestleMania. Originally, I think it was meant to be Ronda versus Charlotte. At some point, I think they changed plans and they were going to do Ronda versus Becky. There's been elements of could it be a three-way at Mania? Why Becky would lose the title if she's not going to be in that match in some shape or form, I don't know. So I still assume that she will be in the match at WrestleMania with Ronda and Charlotte, potentially. But will she be winning the Rumble? I doubt it, because it doesn't seem like she's going to be in the Rumble. So how they're going to get there, I do not know at this point.
She's the most over person they have in the entire company. How they can't be looking at her and going, if Rollins is the guy, she's very much the man. She needs to win that. I'm confused. I think if there's some shenanigans where Ronda gets involved in the title match with Asuka, then I guess that's a way to go. It'll make Asuka look dreadful, or but then it would give them an out. So then it would make Becky look amazing if she then was like injured somehow by Ronda. Ronda would have to turn heel, mind to do that.
We say that, but she came out and she cost both Charlotte and Becky at TLC.
And then they haven't really acknowledged that that's a heel turn,
Yeah.
which it is. But that would then make Becky look really, really good if she then came out and still won the Rumble, maybe eliminating Charlotte if she's involved last. And I think that would push Becky over the top. And like, you have a star, now you have an absolute mega star. It's like, the Shawn going from number one in the Rumble kind of moment. You've made them look as good as you possibly can.
Definitely. So 205 Live is next up. This was a really fun show, as 205 Live is every single week. I love the recaps they do at the start of the show for 205 Live. It means that if you haven't been watching, you can jump in and be right in and know exactly what's going on. Maverick's really good at that voiceover role where he tells everybody what's going on. He sets up the show. He talks about what's happened previously. It's just like watching a TV show, and they sum up really well what's happened in past episodes and kind of give you a clue of where they're going with this episode. It's just really good, and I really like that.
I think we both agree that Drake's our favourite authority figure
without doubt.
in American wrestling, because he's not a super good guy, he's not a super bad guy, just calls it how he sees it, and that's kind of what people are in real life. Obviously, you have people that aren't very nice and people that are super duper nice, but on the whole, people are a mix of both. People have good sides and bad sides, and Drake just calls it as he sees it, and that's fine. He's not going to not treat a bad guy really badly because, I don't like you as a person. He's there to draw people into his show, which is logical.
Absolutely. And I think the heel authority figure's just been done to death, so it's nice to just see a change of pace. But we opened the show in terms of wrestling with Noam Dar versus Tony Nese. This was a fine match for the story they're telling. It worked. The finish made sense with Nese getting a bit cocky and wanting to hit another big move, and sort of Dar kind of catching him to get the upset victory. We'll obviously see a third match between the two of them at some point down the line. I struggle to care about Tony Nese, and I just don't rate Noam Dar, so this match wasn't for me, but everything about it mechanically and storyline-wise was absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, it was fine. I differ slightly on Nese to you. Like, I don't love Nese, and I think if he went away, I wouldn't necessarily miss him. But at the same time, I do think he's very serviceable in his role, and I like him in his role. And I think Noam Dar would be a much bigger star if he was a better wrestler, because I actually think he's very good at his character, and he has... I'm not sure if it's a thing that just doesn't translate to American fans, but I find him quite cool. Back in his Progress days, he comes out of Oasis. Morning Glory, I believe, was his theme tune. He would come out and Oasis are awesome, but it just made him feel cool. And I don't think that I assume it's not translating to the American audience.
We next had an interesting promo from Brian Kendrick where he cut a promo on behalf of Akira Tozawa, who's training in Japan, which I thought was a cool little touch to see he's going away to train for his Royal Rumble title shot in Japan. He then mentioned something Brian Kendrick did about still owing Akira Tozawa. Really interesting line where I don't know where they're going with that. Are they setting up a potential heel turn, which I think would be a mistake because Kendrick's not long just turned babyface? Are they potentially setting up something where Kendrick tries to help Tozawa in the match and we're going to do something like that? I really don't know where they're going with it. I just thought it was interesting that he said he felt he still owed Tozawa.
I think it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, if Kendrick helped Tozawa and Tozawa was almost like this grudging champion. Like, he knew he hadn't won it fairly, but like, I've got it, I'm going to run with it. Like, I've never really... There'll be an example, but I can't think of one. I've never really seen that before, where someone sort of won the title in a way that like they wouldn't want to, but they've got it and they're proud and they're a babyface, so they've got to run with it. And then you could turn them heel down the line. It'd be quite cool, but I think it would be a mistake to turn Kendrick heel because I think Kendrick's story of his redemption arc, I don't think it's finished. So it would be a shame.
We then had a segment with Drake Maverick backstage where he talked to Gulak and Gallagher a little bit about bringing new cruiserweights into the division. This led to, once they left, having given him their recommendations, which he unceremoniously dumped in the bin. We then got Maria and Mike Kanellis come into the room and talk about how despite the fact that he's bringing in all these new cruiserweights, he can't even find time for Mike Kanellis. Apparently, Mike Kanellis hasn't been on 205 for, I believe it was 5 weeks, he said.
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, not many people had. But you know what? It seemed to set up the fact that they're going annoyed at these new guys just because they're getting opportunities, even though we don't know who these new guys are yet, at the expense, potentially, of Mike Kanellis. And it feels like we're probably going to be seeing Mike Kanellis as kind of the gatekeeper of 205 Live, which I think is a really good role for him.
It's kind of like, like what Corbin used to be in NXT, where he was the one that would feud with the guys that were coming in, being like, all these indie guys, like, who were there? You've wrestled for like 10 years? Like, losers. I wrestled for a couple, and I've been here before you.
Different stroke, but it's kind of what Chris Hero, Cassius Ohno, is doing now down in NXT. So definitely, I think the gatekeeper element is something cool for Mike Kanellis to do. We then moved on to our main event. Hideo Itami, Cedric Alexander. This was a thoroughly enjoyable match. Slow going early on. They built the match really well. The finish and stretch was absolutely awesome. They did botch the finish slightly, but it was a really, really good match. The right guy won. Hideo Itami is going into the Fatal 4-Way at the Royal Rumble to face the champion Buddy Murphy, Akira Tozawa, who we mentioned earlier, and Kalisto. This should be a really good match at the Rumble. Potentially could steal the show.
Absolutely. I think it also continues Cedric's story of Cedric being almost there. He's almost there, but every single time he's now falling at the final hurdle, and hopefully that leads to what we sort of await to be a heel turn. I think Hideo was the right choice. I think Hideo was a fantastic wrestler. I loved him as Kenda in Noah, and I think something we'll talk about in just a second. I think he's probably going to be an important guy going forward. I think what we do need to talk about, which was reference to 205 Live at the end, we mentioned it earlier, is Mustafa Ali being gone. I think that creates a very much a vacuum at the top of the 205 Live show and their cards, because I think Ali was going to win the title at WrestleMania.
It certainly seemed to be something on the cards in the future. I don't know whether it was taking place at WrestleMania or whether we may have got there earlier, because I'm not sure they could have dragged it out till WrestleMania. But he was definitely their guy going forward, and him going to SmackDown's created a bit of void in the 205 Live division, so it'll be interesting to see who steps up.
Yeah.
So with the last WWE show we've got to cover this week, we've got NXT. Now...
Oh, it was good.
Well, I like the show. You haven't watched as much NXT over the past year as I have.
No, I get to see highlights a lot of the time.
They have had so many great main events over the past 12 months, and it felt like, to put this over as a really great show, the one thing it was missing was a really great main event. But that's not taken away from the show. It was a really, really good show, thoroughly enjoyable, and it contained the segment of the week, which is something we're going to be doing going forward, where we talk about our favourite segment each week. We're about to talk about our favourite segment of this week right now, because this opening segment was absolutely fantastic. Johnny Gargano comes out and he cuts a promo, and he basically says that he hasn't been listening to Tommaso Ciampa, and then he listens to Tommaso Ciampa by challenging Ricochet for the NXT North American Championship. Ricochet doesn't take too kindly to this and comes out and basically says, "If you want a shot, just ask, mate." And that's all he says. And Ricochet's promo was a little bit rusty. That was the one thing that was a little bit off, and he still needs to work on his promos, but he's getting a lot better, and he still carried himself like a star. Talking of stars, out comes Tommaso Ciampa, doing Tommaso Ciampa things. He's just awesome.
Just being an awful, horrible person.
Yeah, and he's great at it. And then the superstar of the entire segment, Aleister Black, comes on the big screen. He just cuts this brilliant promo, very short and sweet to the point, as it should be with Aleister Black, and then he appears as if out of nowhere in front of Tommaso Ciampa.
Didn't it feel like Taker? Like the kind of thing that Taker would do?
Well, we've always talked about Black being that way, haven't we? He is the Undertaker in terms of how he presents himself, how he carries himself. Not a similar type of character, but in terms of how he is as a being.
The mystique.
Yeah, the mystique. And he has an aura about him that very few people other than Taker have had over the years. This segment was great from start to finish, and it ended with Johnny Gargano super kicking Ricochet, setting up. It's interesting how they're playing Gargano. He's not full heel. He's definitely not a babyface. He's sort of in this tweener, slightly leaning heel tweener kind of role, but he sees himself as a hero of his own story.
He's not a good guy. He's not a bad guy.
Is he the guy?
But he might be the guy for NXT. He's not the man, though.
No, not the man.
I thought this was a great segment. I totally agree. We both watched it and we were both like, yeah, this is 100% our segment of the week. It continues the awesome shades of grey character with Gargano. Every week I see him, like, I'm not sure if he's a good guy or a bad guy. And I love that. I never know what I'm going to get from Johnny Gargano. He gets cheers and then he'll get boos. And you never know what you're going to get. And it was interesting that he told Ciampa to shut up, but you're right, whilst also listening to what Ciampa had actually told him to do.
Yeah.
But so he still hates Ciampa, but he hates everybody else now as well. He's a good guy doing bad things in order to get what he wants, almost. But the super kick came out of nowhere, and it's not the kind of thing that Johnny Gargano or Johnny Wrestling would have done.
No, but it might be the type of thing that Johnny Badass would do. And I don't know whether you noticed, but as he was out there...
Was that what they chanted?
Yeah, it was dueling chants. Like, some of the crowd were chanting Johnny Wrestling, some of the crowd were chanting Johnny Badass, and I think that's where you got a little bit lost and you were wondering what they were chanting. But yeah, I thought that was really cool little element of the angle. But we moved on next to Bianca Belair versus Nikki Cross. It was a good match. Every match they've had in their series has been good, and it was important, I think, with Belair being the challenger for TakeOver Phoenix, that she got this big win over Nikki Cross. They've had this feud going on for a while now, and she finally got the definitive win. And Nikki Cross obviously putting somebody over on her way out. It was a good match, not a great match, but a good match.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was solid. It wasn't great, but I enjoyed it. It was good. I think Nikki's unbelievable in her character, and I haven't seen as much of Bianca in like the last, 8 months. And you've always told me how much that she's come on and how much she's improved. Wow, how she carries herself like an absolute star, and you can see that. You've always told me that the way that she presents herself is fantastic, and she has come on leaps and bounds. And it's a big opportunity for her against Shayna. Really big. If she can have a good match with Shayna, then she's only on her way up.
Definitely agree. It'll be interesting to see what happens at TakeOver. We then had a Street Profits video. It just kind of hyped things up. They're coming back. They're hyped up what they're going to do in the new year. It was a cool little thing. Nothing much to write home about.
I didn't like it. I don't think it's because they were bad, but it just feels a little bit like it's not how real people act.
It's the Street Profits, man. The Street Profits are cool.
Yeah, I don't think that they're bad or the segment was bad. I just think it's one of those things that I look at it and I just go, nah, that's not my thing. And that doesn't mean it sucks. There are loads of things in wrestling that like other people love that are just not my thing.
You've just got no swag. It's cool though.
Yeah.
So next we moved on to an enhancement talent match, and what a match this was!
I love this.
Yeah. Fabian Aichner, who we both like from the Cruiserweight Classic, and Martel Bartel, who is somebody we've both seen on the independent scene in Germany, WXW. Really good performer. Finally seeing them do something with them. So they came out as a tag team. Sadly, we lost Bartel's awesome music, but we'll move on. Against two jobbers. The only thing I will say, because I know you're about to wax lyrical about this match.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing I will say is, this would be a fine match for an established tag team, but for a tag team that you are now trying to establish, they gave the jobbers way too much in this match. Way too much for me. But the match itself was really, really good, and Aichner and Bartel are clearly gelling. I haven't seen any of the work on NXT UK, because I just haven't had time to watch those shows. There's so much wrestling out there right now. But they gelled really well, and I was really impressed with them.
Yeah, Adam's correct. I'm going to wax lyrical. I loved this match. I do agree, and I think they gave the jobbers a little bit too much, to the point where I actually messaged you and said, like, I think these jobbers are like pretty good.
Yeah.
For jobbers, they were pretty good. I was looking at them thinking like they should be given another shot.
Yeah.
But I think Bartel's and Eichner's presentation and look first off was brilliant. They look like they fit together, and they just seem like a badass heel team that are just going to beat you up. And I'm the same as you. I haven't seen them in NXT UK because I simply just don't get much chance to see much of that. I try and watch what I can, but it's like short segments that I get to catch. Maybe Pete Dunne. But I love this match, and I agree. I think they probably gave him a little too much. But as soon as that match ended, I was like, oh, I want to see more of them. I really want to see more of them. They're both fantastic wrestlers. We both liked Icon in the Cruiserweight Classic way back when. And they have the coolest finisher I've seen a tag team have in quite some time. Do you want to sort of describe it to everyone else?
It's basically, it's a powerbomb into a German suplex. That's essentially what it is.
Sounds easy, doesn't it?
It could be scary if you get it wrong, but it is very, very cool looking. We're just going to have to hope they don't get it wrong. That's all I'll say.
If they get it right, it'll be one of the coolest finishes of the year because it just looks amazing. And they got the win and it was great.
Yeah. And one other little note on the presentation before we move on. Nigel was absolutely fantastic in this match. He made Bartel and Eichner seem like absolute superstars, and he's really good in his role anyway, but he came to the fore in this match. Next, we had Ricochet walking out of the building. He wants Johnny Gargano. It was a segment. It furthered the story. I had no problem with this.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a much better promo than the one that he cut in the ring.
A lot more natural.
Yeah, when I saw him speak, I was like, you know what, yeah, like that was a good promo. It wasn't a great promo or anything like that, but it was really good and it sold me on the match.
We then came to Keith Lee backstage and he cut this angry, aggressive promo about what Cassius Ohno had done to Matt Riddle last week. I liked everything about the promo until Lee used his catchphrase at the end, because I don't have a problem with his catchphrase. I think his catchphrase is actually really cool, but if you cut this aggressive promo and then go, and then you will bask in my glory, it kind of takes away from what you've just said, and it lessened the impact of how angry he was at Cassius Ohno.
Yeah, you can't be that annoyed if you're spending that much time to, go with your catchphrase.
Yeah.
I'm just giving an example. Like when Triple H is angry, he doesn't spout out all of his catchphrases and things like that. He just speaks as someone that's really angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Then we had our main event. This was a fine match. There was, it was nothing to write home about, but it was a fine main event. EC3's been in a storyline with the Undisputed Era for a while now. This definitely felt like his swan song, which, like Nikki Cross's match earlier, felt like hers. And he put over Adam Cole on the way out, and the Undisputed Era continued to be just awful human beings, but in the most entertaining way possible.
The best thing going today.
Yeah. And the one thing, nice reference, the one thing that I want to mention before I let you talk about the whole segment is we have spent a few moments in different shows here talking about how WWE cannot build baby faces. My God, NXT can, because they made the War Raiders look so good at the end of this match.
They looked amazing.
The Undisputed Era beating EC3 down 4-on-1, and the War Raiders come out and they beat them up, and they take them out 2-on-4. They had no help. It was just two guys, and they beat up four members of the Undisputed Era.
Yeah, because EC3 was down. Yeah. I don't remember him helping out.
I think he rolled out the ring, if I remember correctly. But they decimated all four guys. And if this was a heel team that was maybe not as over as the Undisputed Era, maybe this segment wouldn't be the best idea because you're having two guys taking out four. But the Undisputed Era are pretty much bulletproof at this point. Yeah, and the War Raiders needed something big after, setting up their title match at the Royal Rumble takeover. This was it. They made them look like stars. They are babyfaces that will potentially take the titles away from Undisputed Era, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I first off, I'll just talk about War Raiders. I totally agree. I think the segment at the end made them look like absolute stars. We both liked them when they were on the independent scene as War Machine.
Yeah, I think you liked them more than me, but I was a fan of them.
Yeah, but they're now going into TakeOver super hot, and they look great. I'm not going to talk too much about Undisputed Era. I think they're one of the coolest things about NXT, arguably the coolest thing about NXT. But Cole is clearly the star, and Cole probably should have been higher up the card for quite some time in NXT. He still feels like a star. It doesn't really matter that he hasn't got the title in a way, but I think that must be in his future soon, unless they're going up, because I don't think the main roster can wait much longer. The only thing I will say, title, because I think you've hit on most of the key points from the match, which I thought was a decent match. I loved what O'Reilly, Fish and Strong did around the ring.
Yeah.
They didn't just go, "Come on, Adam, come on, Bree." But what they actually did is they just supported and gave advice to Cole when he was in the ring. And it was a nice little touch.
Bobby Fish was really, really good in on the outside of the three. And and he actually got shut up Bobby Chance at some point, but it wasn't go-away heat, it was good heat. So I definitely agree there. But I think we've covered everything WWE related. We obviously touched on the news earlier, so I think it's time to just move on to any of the business in the wrestling world. I think we touched on Homecoming last week, the Impact Wrestling pay-per-view that was going to be taking place last weekend, and I think we need to just briefly cover that. And the big talking point from the show was Johnny Impact retaining the championship, the World Championship against Brian Cage. Also, little spoiler alert here, so let's, if anybody wants to skip forward about 30 seconds, we're just going to cover a little few spoilers here. We then saw at the tapings that Johnny Impact will be facing Brian Cage again for the championship at the Mexico City TV taping that's going to be taking place soon. And Brian Cage was an absolute star, according to all the taping reports. He was the most over guy.
Yeah, by a country mile, apparently.
Yeah, so definitely set that up really well. The really interesting one for me was Taya Valkyrie beating Tessa Blanchard at the Homecoming pay-per-view for the Knockouts Championship. They are going somewhere with Tessa and Gail. Tessa, apparently, according to you, I didn't see this in the spoiler reports I read, but apparently she is becoming, being turned babyface.
Yeah, the crowd's supporting her so much that it's going to be hard for her to get booed. It is Gail, so that might help her, but the crowd actually trying to still the champ at her. She's the best female wrestler they have.
Yeah, we've covered most of the important stuff, so I'll just run through the rest of the results. Rich Swann won the X Division Championship. Ali and Sue Young lost to Jordan Grace and her partner, who was
Kira Hogan.
Yes, I couldn't remember her name there. It's just gone for me. Thanks for saving us there. Rosemary appeared at the end of the match, which was cool. Eddie Edwards defeated Moose, which was a big victory for Edwards. And they continued the evolution of his character. Sami Callihan defeated Willie Mack in the one match I have actually seen from the show so far. Really, really good match. Good match. Eli Drake defeated Abyss in the Monsters Ball match.
I think that was big for Drake.
Yeah, well, it had to happen. In old TNA, they may have booked this wrong, but in the new Impact Wrestling, they were always going to get this match result right. And LAX defeated the Lucha Bros in what was apparently a really good tag match, which I am planning on watching. I just haven't had a chance to.
It surprises me as well. I did have a feeling that Lucha Bros would win, but then I think they're I'm not sure they'll be staying there that long. If I was All Elite, I'd be all over some Pentagon Jr. in Phoenix.
Depends whether they want to tie themselves down anywhere. They seem to be enjoying doing the whole touring thing at the minute, including CMLL and AAA at the same time, which is totally bizarre. I think the next thing we need to touch on news-wise is coming tomorrow night in Blackpool, in our home country of England. We've got NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool, the first UK takeover for the NXT UK brand.
And we can't go.
Yeah, we couldn't get tickets. The show doesn't look as good as I hoped it would look, but it does certainly look like a decent card on paper.
The atmosphere will be amazing.
I'll just run through the matches quickly. So we've got Mustache Mountain, which is Trent Seven and Tyler Bate, for anybody who doesn't know, against the Grizzled Young Vets, which is Zach Gibson and James Drake. Yeah, that's a tag team match at the end of a tournament for the UK Tag Team Championships. We've got Rhea Ripley defending the NXT UK Women's Championship against a woman who should be on the main roster, but for some reason is stuck in NXT UK, in Toni Storm.
Undoubtedly, she's as good as anybody on the main roster.
Speaking of people who should be on the main roster, we've got the WWE United Kingdom champion, Pete Dunne, who's been champ, I think, for about 1,000 days at this point, and could be champ for another 1,000 days for all I care. He's just absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. He's defending the title against Joe Coffey, who I think you said you'd seen a few segments from, and he's coming on.
Yeah, they had a contract signing, and they carried the promo really well. Coffey, I haven't seen loads of him. I've only seen little bits of him in companies like What Culture Pro Wrestling back when it was called that. But he's improved on the mic. Mm-hmm. And Pete Dunne's Pete Dunne. He should be on the main roster because I believe Dave Meltzer said it before on The Observer that he believes he's one of the 15 best wrestlers in the world.
The last two matches on the cards, a no DQ match between Dave Mastiff and Eddie Dennis, which could be pretty cool, and Jordan Devlin versus Travis Banks, which is two really good wrestlers. I don't know the story going in, but I am going to catch TakeOver at the weekend, and hopefully it'll be a really good show. The last thing I think we need to cover in terms of upcoming shows is the ROH shows coming up at the weekend. On Saturday they've got the TV tapings, nothing announced for that, but then they've got Honor Reigns Supreme, which is taking place the next night. And the main matches from that, the big one is Jay Lethal versus Dalton Castle for the ROH World Championship. It's the rematch that Dalton's been waiting for since he's come back. If you haven't been checking out the Pinnacle series that they're doing on YouTube, you need to check it out. The most recent one is around Dalton Castle and the build-up to his title shot. It's such a cool thing that they're doing. I think this was the 5th one they've done.
Is it the one with the NWA?
Yeah, it is the one with the NWA with Lagana and I've forgotten his name.
Do you mean Billy Corgan?
Billy Corgan. Totally gone.
Smashing pumpkins, man.
It's because it says William in the credits. Totally throws us every time. So that's the main event. We've also got Kelly Klein versus Jenny Rose for the Women of Honor Championship, which is a street fight, playing off their angle. The Kingdom in a 6-man tag against probably the most random team you'll have ever heard of in Shane Hurricane Helms, Delirious, and Luchasaurus. Totally bizarre team.
That fits.
Yeah. Then we've got
Luchasaurus.
Luchasaurus is the guy from Lucha Underground, the tall guy from the Snake Tribe.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. We've then got Villain Enterprises against the Silas Young and the Briscoes, which is an interesting little thing. We'll see how that goes.
The last real men.
Bandito versus PJ Black, Flip Gordon versus Tracy Williams, and the Best Friends versus Taguchi Japan of David Finlay and Juice Robinson. You can tell this is a new era for ROH. I'm really interested to see where they go, so I will definitely be checking out this show at the weekend.
Yeah, there's a lot of new guys there, so it'll be very interesting to see what, if anything, has changed, or it's just simply like ROH continue as normal, well run, well executed, and a good company.
And now we're going to come on to the final segment of the show. We said we'd be doing something different every week, so this year we're going to be doing the end of year awards for 2018. So we're just going to run through them and hit on what our personal thoughts were. The top award is for promotion of the year. So Jonathan, what was yours this year?
I think for promotion, we don't necessarily consider Lucha Underground a promotion, do we? No, we do.
We do, yeah.
Oh, honestly, my eyesight's getting worse as I get older. I think LU could be something that we can argue. It's certainly been a great TV show. But I think we both agree on this. I think we agree that it's New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, it's the same for me.
Yeah.
They're by far and away the best company in the past 12 months.
Yeah, by a mile.
I'll just explain the definition between the next two awards as well. We have a Superstar of the Year award and a Wrestler of the Year award. The Superstar of the Year is like all-round performer. Wrestler of the Year is purely based on in-ring talent. So I'm just going to hit on who I've got for both. I had Kazuchika Okada as the Superstar of the Year, and I had Kota Ibushi as the Wrestler of the Year. What about you?
For Superstar of the Year, I differed slightly to you, but I agree with who you think. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I thought Kenny Omega, just because I think his whole character's become so fantastic. But I think in the end that Okada's had such an amazing year that I have no problems. I have no problems giving it to Okada. For Wrestler of the Year, I think we talked about several people, didn't we? We talked about Kota Ibushi, who's had a fantastic year. We talked about Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada. You can't really argue when they had the best match of all time. But there were several people that we talked over. I think in the end, we both kind of agreed. We I don't know, had very similar tastes in pro wrestling, and we went for Kota Ibushi.
So next up was the easiest award of the year to award. It was the Female Superstar of the Year. It's Becky Lynch.
Yeah, there's nobody else. Not even close.
It's Becky Lynch. That's all I think we need to say on that one. Tag Team of the Year.
This one was a little harder because we both didn't think it had been a great year for tag team wrestling. The Revival have just dropped off.
I don't think it was so much that it wasn't a great year for tag team wrestling. I just don't think there was anybody who massively stood out.
Yeah, I agree. The Young Bucks are fantastic as always. Evil and Sonata have been fantastic. Is there anybody else you can think of?
The Undisputed Era, I came very close to giving this award to. But in the end, I went with the Young Bucks.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think they're the best tag team in the world. There were others like Revival who are there when they're given the chance, WWE. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Young Bucks makes sense.
So what about your match of the year? I think we agree on this one.
Yeah, I really don't think you can argue. I think it's Okada versus Omega, the 2 out of 3 falls match from Dominion. The, 50-star match? Something that Meltzer gave it on The Observer?
Yeah.
It's the best match, rated-wise, of all time. You can't argue.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably, I'd say, the best match I've ever seen. I know we talked about favourite matches last week, and nothing will beat Dragon and Nigel for me, but this was arguably a better match.
Yeah,
if I'm looking at it objectively.
Best and favourite, not the same thing. Like, nothing will ever beat Flair Steamboat for me.
Mm-hmm. So, Angle /feud of the year. for me, it's something that's still ongoing. It's the continuous hatred between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa.
I think this story has so many levels that I think it's very fair to give it to this. There weren't a great deal of other things that sprang into my mind. I mean, I don't really think we can. Can you talk about being the Elite as a storyline? There's about 50.
I suppose you could talk about strands within it, like the Omega Cody stuff. I thought was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it wasn't a feud per se, but I loved the angle of Omega and Ibushi getting back together in New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The feud between Omega and Okada. There was tons of good stuff, I thought, this year, but I think Ciampa and Gargano stood out to me as the definitive winner.
It's the feud in NXT history now, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One-off show of the year, so I'll just explain what I mean by one-off show of the year. That's a pay-per-view / event, however you want to term it, that is not... It could just be an episode of Raw.
So, for example, like when they ran Starrcade, if Starrcade had been brilliant, you could have given it.
You could have given it to that. If you'd thought a particular episode of Monday Night Raw was brilliant, you could have given it to that. But it has to be a one-off thing, so it can't be a long run. You can't say SmackDown all year was the best one-off show of the year. So my answer for this was Dominion. It was, for me, by far and away the best card of the year, and probably the only time in recent memory that Wrestle Kingdom got blown out of the water, because Dominion this year was leaps and bounds better than... last year was leaps and bounds better than an already awesome Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, when we talked about this originally, my first reaction was, it's Wrestle Kingdom. Because I automatically, it's like a reflex. I just go, Wrestle Kingdom was the best show of the year, because by and large it usually is. And a lot of your matches, because Adam rates matches a lot and has a top 50, has a top 50 list of the best matches of the year. A lot of them always starts at Wrestle Kingdom, and you've got several already that are in there. But I agree, Dominion, best show of the year by a country mile. There wasn't just Okada Omega, the whole show was great. No arguments whatsoever.
So we go from best to worst, and this year Backlash was horrendous. I will not even allow you an opinion on this one. If you don't agree with me that Backlash was the worst show of the year, I'm going to revoke your wrestling card. It was awful. It was so bad that people were so adamant to listen to what Brian Alvarez and Dave Meltzer had to say about it. They actually crashed the Observer website. They were overloaded with traffic, and the Observer website crashed because they couldn't handle the amount of people that wanted to listen to Brian Alvarez rant about how bad the show was.
And he did.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, I'd agree with Backlash. I think a lot of the B pay-per-views for WWE would be in they're always that sort of average to meh.
But nothing was as actively bad as Backlash was.
No, just maybe boring rather than actively bad. But again, logic and entertainment. Adam and I have always said we can sort of take something being logical, but not necessarily that fun, and we can also take something that's crazy fun, but not always that logical.
Like Car Crash TNA, yeah.
Yeah. But ideally when it's together, that's the best.
That's the best. Backlash was neither, which is definitely what you do not want. So, best moment of the year, I know we're both going to agree on this. It was my worst moment of the year a few years ago when he retired, and when he returned this year. No, the Yes Movement is dead. But when he returned earlier this year, Daniel Bryan, that was just amazing. Nothing was ever going to beat that. I only actually ever, because I update this throughout the year, I only actually ever had 3 moments in there this year. It was Kota Ibushi and Kenny Omega rejoining together.
That makes sense.
Which was then replaced by Ilya Dragunov making his return to WXW, because that was just such a cool moment. And if anybody hasn't seen it, go on WXW's YouTube channel and find Ilya Dragunov's return at the 16-karat gold tournament from this past year. It was amazing.
It's loud.
So awesome. But that was immediately superseded by Bryan's return. I remember when the news broke, and me and him could just not control our excitement. It was amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing else. There is literally nothing else. I think that's a personal thing as well. Bryan's not my favourite wrestler of all time, but that includes a lot of people. He's in the top 5, I think. I love Daniel Bryan. It's fantastic.
So let's go on to worst moment of the year then. I don't know what you think about this, but for me, it was sort of the exploitation of the Roman Reigns cancer situation. I don't want that involved in my wrestling. I'm sorry. I know some people might think it's good heat or whatever. I don't want to think about that in wrestling. I want to wish Roman Reigns all the best in his recovery. But past that, if you're going to pay tribute to him, fine. But exploiting that and using it as part of the storyline was just awful for me.
Yeah, I think for me it's sort of it's a combination of Roman having to like the promo where Roman had to say that he had leukemia and that he had to go away, and the crowd having booed him at the start, that sort of groan of like, oh, now we feel bad, we just booed you and you've come out to tell us you have cancer. But then, continuing on from that, it's the use of that in order to get just awful cheap heat. They don't need to do it. And I think that may be the one thing, there's been bad booking, but that may be the one thing that ruined the Rollins and Ambrose storyline, because it immediately made everybody go, yeah, this sucks, I'm not watching it.
Next, we'll move on to our last award, and if you've got any more, if you want to hear or see any more of these awards, they will be posted very, very soon on our blogger page, so I will let you know where that is. We might link it on the Twitter account or whatever when it's posted. I'm in the process of writing them up. It will happen at some point. So there's many more awards that get awarded, but we'll just go to the last one, and that is the best televised show of the year. What was it for you, Jonathan?
I think for me, it's a combination of either Lucha Underground, which, if you haven't seen that, watch it. They're currently potentially on a break, potentially over. If you watch it, then maybe that'll convince El Rey Network to bring it back. Please, please, please go watch it. It's the best show on TV. Best show on TV. It's either Lucha Underground or NXT. I think Lucha Underground was better last season than it has been this season. It's still been great this season, but I think for consistency and for the consistently great TV show that it is, I think it's NXT. And the one that I watched before this episode is a testament to that, which you say, like, there are much better ones.
Yeah. Last year's main events, there was so many great main events for NXT, and for me it had to go to NXT. I've given Lucha Underground this award for the past 3 years. They won it in 2015, 2016 and 2017. But this year was the year that somebody finally took their crown. And
it's a sandwich as well. You had NXT in 2014 as well.
Well, there we go. NXT's coming back, baby. Or should I say, baby. But no, really, really good year. So many amazing main events on NXT this year, and I think that's what put it over the top for me. Just touching on LU, because I think it's interesting why you mentioned that. It's not a show that's for everyone. And I think
should be.
It should be, because it's awesome, and I know a lot of people whose opinion I respect quite a lot, who really don't like the show and don't understand it.
Jim Cornette despises it.
Yeah, but I think it is an absolutely fantastic show and possibly the best wrestling show I've ever seen, and I really, really, really hope it comes back. So if anybody at El Rey's Network is listening, please renew that show. Please.
Otherwise, we're going to be really sad, and you don't want to see two grown men crying.
No. Anyway, unless there's anything else you want to add, Jonathan, I think that'll do it for the second episode of the Two-Man Booth.
No, I think we've hit all the major points. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening once again. We hope you've enjoyed. We hope you enjoyed last week. If you haven't listened to last week's show, you can go back and listen to it on our SoundCloud or our YouTube account. Follow us on Twitter at Two-Man Booth. And we really hope you'll join us again next week. But sorry, we're out of time. We'll see you next week on the Two-Man Booth.